Welcome back to another episode of Friends from Work, a podcast about all things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's a podcast that's hosted by me, Kyle Sconawill, and my longtime friend from work, Robbie Earl. Listeners of Friends from Work Plus are going to hear this bit twice, but that's okay because I am in San Antonio, Texas right now, coming to you live from a Hyatt Place hotel. And earlier this week...
Love that Hyatt Place.
The Hyatt Place is slam dunk. Earlier this week, I made the 1.5 hour drive to Austin, Texas, where Robbie and I celebrated together by watching and recording X-Men Origins Wolverine. What a treat.
Yeah, what I appreciate is that you scheduled some work in San Antonio just so that we could watch and record X-Men Origins Wolverine together. I mean, obviously, like that, you really went out of your way, and I appreciate that. I think our listeners will appreciate that. I mean, for a movie of that caliber, you really can't do any less.
No doubt. I mean, that was the important one we had to get together in the same room for. So,
yep.
Wow, what a blast. I got to see her house. We hit up our favorite Austin pizza place, Home Slice. Shout out Home Slice. Mm-hmm. Had to quick get a home slice while Robbie was at home.
Wow.
And it was delicious. And then, crushed X-Men Origins Wolverine through the night. It was a blast seeing you. Hopefully, I'll be back in some form or fashion, potentially for Deadpool and Wolverine, which...
Man.
Our world is currently obsessed with Wolverine right now. Me and you, I mean, everything we're doing is X-Men 97, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Like, we're just going on this X-Men kick right now.
Which is funny because, I've seen some people point this out on our Discord, but the series has really been pretty restrained in how much it has focused on Wolverine.
Yeah, good point.
For how much, because we've talked about, I think, on our X-Men rewatch, which at this point, I think one of those is now available on our main feed.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, maybe? Question mark?
Yep, it is.
And I think maybe this is where we talked about it, but the film series very much makes Wolverine the protagonist, at least the whole kind of first, up until Days of Future Past, and then even still, we had Logan, which was arguably the most successmal X-Men movie following. No, definitely the most successful X-Men movie following
not
Days of
arguably.
Future Past.
Yeah. No
so
doubt.
I'm like ticking through those. I guess Deadpool, but there you go. Which is how we get to where we are now. But I am interested to talk about that element of the 97 series, because I think it's been fun seeing different, like as we're going on our rewatch of the films, seeing how different characters are highlighted, different stories are adapted. It is a very fun X-Men season here.
No doubt. Before we dive into episode 4 of X-Men 97, I wanted to give you a little teaser, Robbie, that I'm thinking, if time constraints allow, that I will record a solo episode for Friends from Work Plusers this week, totally unrelated to the MCU, just with a quick review of 3 things that I watched this week. So I finally watched Baby Driver for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow.
This
nice.
Week. Enjoyed it. I watched
that's a fun one.
season 2 of Netflix's Full Swing, the golf documentary. And then the thing I wanted to tell you is I binged all of 3 Body Problem. Have you heard about this?
I have, and it's actually funny because we were just talking in our X-Men Origins episode about David Benioff.
Unbelievable.
Who, crazy.
I didn't know
was
that
one
tie.
of the showrunners, creators of the Game of Thrones series, was one of the writers of X-Men Origins Wolverine, and is now one of 3 creators of 3 Body Problem with his former, I guess, still current colleague on Game of Thrones. And I think they have another writer there as well. But no, I have heard great things about it. I don't know. I've seen varying things online. The people that I know that have watched it seem to have enjoyed it. But you are kind of unique, again, in that you have no real experience with Game of Thrones, or your only experience with Benioff is through X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Right.
So maybe it's a step up.
I wanted to bring that up because of that tie-in. Also, I found it fascinating that there are 2 references to Oppenheimer in that movie. Not the movie, but just two things that I learned from the movie about his life that they directly talk about in that film. And then super random, there's this joke about a Mexican guy who pushed his wife off a cliff. That joke gets brought up in Three Body Problem and in Baby Driver. And I thought, what are the chances? But anyways, the weird tie-in of all these, which makes no sense, was kind of blowing my mind. I am going to do an episode, I think, giving a review of that where I talk about spoilers. Spoiler-free, Robbie, I would say that through 3 episodes, I was like, oh, dang, this has a chance to be my next show. Like, I don't think it's Severance level, but it's Silo level. And I was so intrigued, and the show really just kind of takes a turn and became something that I was not as interested in. So I without looking at reviews, said it was a 95 to start. And when there's mystery and kind of like Super 8 or something where you don't know what's going on, it's a 95%. Once you kind of figure out what's going on, it's a little bit of the mystery is less, like the answer is less cool than the buildup. Kind of. And then the show kind of takes a turn. And so I said it wasn't 95. It finishes at like a 75. And then sure enough, I Googled it. It has 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's a good show, not a great show, I thought.
That's your mutant power, is being able to guess Rotten Tomato percentages.
Yeah. I'd probably maybe go a tick lower than that. But good show, not great show. But it's one of these that I really want to talk about anyways, because it's on my mind. It's like one of these that lingers with you. It's not finished yet. Yeah. So you can't stop thinking about it.
When it's, I know it's a trilogy, I think, the book series.
The books.
Does it seem as though they're doing like 3 seasons?
I've recently, if they have the money, they would have to plot-wise. I have no idea if it'll get canceled or if they don't have a large enough budget, just because the scope of the show, it's so sci-fi in nature. I was reading that it would take close to a $500 million budget to do 3 seasons, like $500 million, which makes about sense, like 180 or something a season. But that's a ton for a show. And so I could see it not happening, but plot-wise, they definitely would need it to happen for sure. It's weird that that's the phase we've been in. I was watching that, which is a book. Silo is a book. Dune is a book. It's just kind of this era. Hey. I can't see it because your mic is blocking your shirt.
Oh, man.
Oh, Worm Rider Coalition.
I've got my Nerd Riot Worm Rider Coalition shirt on. I've been getting a lot of compliments on this one.
See,
we've talked about our best Nerd Riot.
Yeah.
Like our success rate, and this is high for me. That's
Mobius key lime pies.
Yeah, that's excellent.
They are really, really, really good at what we talk about, which is I didn't even realize you were wearing a Dune shirt until you pointed it out. And now I'm like, oh, I get it.
But it's if you know, you know. Also, I love that you can just, if you're watching video, part of the benefit is you can always see various parts of my dog as he like shifts across the floor.
I was doing that Ask Us Anything on Instagram while I was with you in Austin. And again, you'll hear that on the other bonus episode. But one of our listeners just said, this is not a question, but I just want some shots of Samwise. And so I obliged. All right. X-Men 97, episode 4, after a quick word from these sponsors. So we're now 4 episodes in. A few things are clear to me, Rob. It's clear to me they know what they're doing. It's clear to me they know how to target and play on the nostalgia effect and get people that were into the show back into the show. It's clear they understand a lot of the things that us fans are wanting. Easter eggs, shout outs to things. I mean, I was just editing our X-Men Origin Wolverines episode, and you brought up at the end of the episode the video game. And then that was before we knew we were about to jump into a mock version of a video game in X-Men 97, which is super weird timing that you would bring that up. I think you even get a couple shout outs to that specific video game.
Well, and I was telling you, because we got to watch this episode together as well before you went back to San Antonio. And I think a lot of people of our generation, at least around the same age as the generation that grew up with this cartoon, if you ever went to a physical arcade, which is something that I remember doing, which was so fun. Like we would always have birthday parties and stuff at this arcade in town. And they had this, one of those massive console arcade games for the X-Men. And it was like a 6-player thing. Like you had that many buttons and stations. And you could get like a gang of your friends and you pick your character and you have to go through like a side scrolling thing. And everybody has like the punch and kick, but then you have like 2 main abilities. Cyclops was always the most fun because you just get to blast people. And that game was iconic. It was actually released on the PlayStation Store at one point several years ago. And then I think it got taken down like a lot of that digital stuff does. Physical media, folks, you just have to go and get Blu-rays and vinyls and massive arcade consoles to keep in your house.
Which you do. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Not the massive arcade consoles yet.
That's going to be my next Kyle's List bonus episode, my most influential video games, and you're going to be a part of that.
I love that.
I want to talk about video games at some point. So I said it's clear that the excellence is there. I'm almost certain, unless this takes a huge nosedive, that I'm going to reflect on X-Men 97 in saying it's the best animated show they've made thus far. I mean, for me, through 4 episodes, it's better than What If season 1 and 2. And I think it would be a pretty tough bar to clear. All that being said, this was definitely for me my least favorite episode of the 4 that I've seen, where I would say that in the past, each episode was stair-stepping up. This was not a stair-step up. It's not a left turn. It's not a falling off the cliff. I think a lot of people loved it online. Just for me, preference-wise, this was not totally my scene. One, I don't think I love the 2-part totally separate story type format that they did. Now, a lot of kids shows, which you may not know, Robbie, that is the format. Like when you watch Spidey and His Amazing Friends and it's a 20-something minute episode, it's actually 2 14-minute episodes or 13-minute episodes that are totally not related. I think it's because kids are not supposed to watch TV for very long, and you can pause one after half of an episode technically, or part 1 of 2 parts of episodes. So that is the format. But I was thinking about how we've been talking about how this show has kind of aged up a little bit to where I don't know that it fits in the kids show vibe anymore. So I just don't think I want the format of 2 14-minute episodes in one episode, especially when the second one in particular is not just a fun side story. It's actually dealing with some heavier things and some themes of purpose and lost love. And it doesn't feel super like a kid's show. And so to split that one up into 2 parts, I don't love. And I also just don't love and again, I get it. This is an episodic serial, like every Saturday morning type thing that they're emulating. So this makes sense. But for me, as a fan of the MCU and someone who didn't watch that, I don't love these big detours, these large detours where it's like, hey, we have a kind of main group and a main plot flowing, but then let's take a sidestep to tell a story on Jubilee and a quick side story to tell a story on Forge. And we didn't get any of the Jean, Cyclops, Wolverine. Not that I need those characters, but it ends up feeling disconnected. And that's probably a missed expectation on my part, where I need to get used to this style of thing where it's like, hey, this is just a Saturday morning thing that's fun. It doesn't have to be connected. You don't have to get a checkup on all the characters every time. But I think those are all reasons why on 2 watches, it's not my personal favorite preference-wise. My wife tries to teach my daughter that when she doesn't like broccoli, you don't say it's yucky. You just say, that's not your favorite right now. Try not to put it down. Don't yucky someone else's yummy. And so I'm not trying to yucky someone else's yummy, okay? It's just not my personal favorite right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I think I'm probably in a similar spot. For your sake and for the people that have not seen the original series like you, part of the DNA of the original show was each episode would kind of focus on not one character necessarily, but normally a couple. Like you would have some like, oh, here's Cyclops going to deal with something, or here's Wolverine going to deal with something. But often you would pair characters off. You actually saw examples of some of those in the video game when she's kind of going through old past, because that is, I'm sure people caught on to this, but part of the fun of that and part of the nostalgia value is getting to kind of see these plots revisited, but in like video game form. But she talks about how she's like held hostage in Genosha with Gambit and Storm, and that's like, that is baked into the format. However, the mid episode split is a new one. And I agree with you that like it makes sense, but I always like, I think back to shows that did that, like SpongeBob would do that. Like each episode was like 11 minutes. But the thing there is that was always the case. And then there was a commercial break in between. So it was kind of like, here's an episode, commercial, come back, here's an episode. And it's just, they're both in the 1 30-minute block. I think that the streaming aspect kind of makes it feel weirdly abrupt. Like I, whenever I was watching it with you, looked up and saw like the new title card, and I was like, wait, was the other one like a cold open for this episode? Like I wasn't, because I just hadn't looked at the title and seen that it was like a slash. So to me, it kind of struck me as odd, especially with the second half being a part one of a story. Like there's a part of me that's like, I guess I see the value because you're putting a cliffhanger element so that people feel the tug to come back the next week. But I think the part of me that wants like some symmetry, which is all of the parts of me, like it seems like there's another kind of like aside maybe that you could have put in. Here's a checkup on Jubilee and Sunspot, and then here's a checkup on either, like, I'm sure we're going to get more about the UN meeting with Genosha, but something else that would be kind of equally like a character study.
Sure.
I don't know. It feels, but then I could also see people saying like, oh, well, those are just two. Now you have two detour, like throwaway plots. And here at least we have like kind of a fun thing and then like a more serious one. So I'm not against it, and I wasn't upset about it, like what you're saying, but I did feel like it was, it struck me as weird.
If there's anyone I know that loves symmetry, it's Robbie Earl. I mean, this is the guy who, when we schedule things out, it's like, no, this has got to be at this time. Otherwise, it's going to throw me off. Like, why would we talk about this if we're not then talking about that next week? Like, why would you? Which I appreciate about you. Plot-wise, it obviously was fun to get some more Jubilee. And as a little teaser here, we are actually planning on talking with Jubilee, I think in the next week or two, the actress who plays her, Holly Chow, which is going to be amazing because she actually has been in some other stuff too. We're not going to talk to her about that, but she's a legend in her own right. And so that's going to be really, really fun. And a few others, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Really looking forward to that format of this show. It was fun to see her. Obviously, I think that was the episode that was just full of Easter eggs, right? For people that had been watching the Mojo stuff and the video game levels, like you said, the pairing off, like all the nostalgia there, that had to have been dripping.
Well, and I think talking about Easter eggs, I think one thing that Greg flagged for me is the older Jubilee in the show is voiced by the actor that played Jubilee in the original series.
I caught that too, and that's a very, very special way to keep them involved. That's so cool. Like if they decide that obviously Jubilee's voice has aged up, Avatar, did you did you catch that part? If they decide that it wasn't going to work, what a fun way to still make sure that she was still involved. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, far be it from me to criticize Avatar.
Yeah.
Kyle,
I know that's your favorite movie of the last year or so. So
yeah, I mean, I'll let it slide.
Sigourney Weaver playing a 13-year-old teenager. You know, who would have thought that wasn't going to work? Mojo's a thing, though, right? From the originals.
Yes. Yeah. And that is, I think he's it's a character that either grates on you or is really
it's
funny.
Obviously intentionally annoying. That's the point.
Right. I mean, I do think that they have done a good job of updating that character to kind of keep with the purpose in the 90s, which was like a commentary on what they were making. Like it's like it's very meta, obviously, because it's this person that creates a television show about the X-Men in an episode of a television show about the X-Men. And so there's a lot of kind of fun commentary that comes out of that. And I feel like
another television show about the X-Men.
Right. That's true.
How many layers, Inception, can we go here?
They took kind of a different, it must be a different voice actor that's handling Mojo here, which would make sense. And I think I like the direction. I think it's actually slightly less grating than the voice from the 90s. But yeah, which says something. I think what I liked about this episode, and I caught this more on a rewatch, is that moment at the end where Jubilee is talking with her kind of older self, and you made the Flash movie comparison there. I felt like that line about how, I know you want to stay here forever and it's really nice to know how everything ends, but that's not really what life is about. One, I thought was really effective on just like a personal level. Like I thought that was kind of a moving moment. And I think this show has continually surprised me with its ability to bring things like that out. Like obviously that is not nearly as heavy as the stuff we talked about with like Scott and Jean and Madeline. But I feel like that's sure. It gets real for a second, but also it's such a great moment for people that are coming to this show as fans of the original, where it's like they know they're playing on nostalgia. So there's a whole, half episode about that. And then to end it and say like, but like, that's not really why we're here. Like that's all fun, but we're not just trying to live in the past and recreate those moments. We're moving forward. And I like that both for the purpose of this show and also because like we've talked about, insofar as Disney is looking at this as a success and looking at how they want to make other Marvel properties follow suit, I think that's an encouraging thing. Like when we look at Daredevil, Born Again, I think that's the right approach. Like, yes, honor the stuff that's come before that people really love. You don't have to go back and just play the hits over and over again. Like, yes, we love that Bernthal is coming back as Punisher. Yes, it's fun now that we have like Foggy and Karen, but I think that shows a certain level of of understanding and maturity from a creator standpoint that I would like to see trickle down to these other projects, both films and series.
On the personal front, had a little bit of that Barbie, Pleasantville, Truman Show, WandaVision type theme ending, and I appreciate that as well. And the Flash, like you talked about, but thematically for sure. I agree. I liked the commentary. I liked everything you said. So just ditto to that. I think
we got a good teen romance moment there at the end.
Kind of two attempted romance moments in this full episode. This is a 2-part romance, although a failed one, albeit on the second one.
Yeah, it's easier when you're a teen.
That's the takeaway from today's episode. If you're going to fall in love, you might as well do it when you're a teenager, because otherwise you're toast.
You know what teenagers love to hear is how easy their lives are.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. First thing about parenting. Tell a teenager they have it easy. In the second episode, Forge is kind of caught in a web, not a web of lies, that, as Storm says, but a web of deceit, in that he was helping fund the government make these anti-mutant devices, right? That's the takeaway here. In the past, when he was at a low moment. And why didn't it work for Storm then? I didn't really catch that. Because he didn't know how to do it? He didn't have the technology yet, or he didn't want it to happen?
I don't think it's the last one. I think he wanted it to happen. I think that I appreciated the nuance that they put into that conversation where he's saying that he engaged in the research that a scientist in Scotland then used to create the collars.
Was it me?
But I think right. And so I think that explains why he feels guilt about it, but why he doesn't necessarily have all of the power at this point to do anything, because it's like I guess, or the knowledge to do anything, because it's not actually his invention, but it's based on technology that he developed. So I think it creates this interesting tension where he kind of bears the responsibility without really having it's all the great responsibility without the great power, you might say.
I was thankful that it didn't work for Storm, just because I like these things to sit in the consequences. And I feel like if Storm had gotten her powers back this quick, I know she'll get it back, but if she'd gotten them back already, it feels like maybe we rushed through that plot point. And so I kind of like that didn't work, and that it ended with a slap in the face and a walkout. However, although it looks like you're going to educate me on something, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to, as a reminder, that they are doing such a great job of tracing this Claremont run. And this is the volume 4 omnibus of that original Uncanny X-Men series. And this is yet another famous story from that called Life Death. And so I just wanted to point out that is like an era where Storm loses her powers. And so I think you're right for them to kind of lean into that and sit with it for a second instead of just rush through.
We watched this together this week, and I felt like you were genuinely surprised by the ending as well. I was like, what the heck with this owl that wants to feast on her misery? Do you have any insight into that? I think that's an example of, just preference-wise, if you don't know anything of what they're talking about, it feels a little bit like weird and what in the world? Like, I didn't feel that way about the first episode or second episode, for example. Obviously, last week was also kind of trippy, but because I think the episode starts with it and takes you to hell right away, like you're kind of into that. This is an episode that doesn't feel like it's about that at all. And then all of a sudden, this super sinister feeling ending that I was very confused by with a giant owl.
So I do like it. It makes sense within the context of that story, and I can see what they're doing. I think it's probably worth just waiting until next week to unpack that, rather than, because I feel like any explanation from that story is just going to wind up being spoilery, and I would rather kind of see how they deal with it.
Did it feel out of left field to you at all, or did you know from the second you saw Storm and Forge, like, oh, she might be in some weird spot, or this owl is important?
I knew that. So, full disclosure, I have not actually read the Life Death story. I know what it's about, which is kind of my relationship with a lot of those X-Men comics. They're just, man, X-Men comics they're great, and I've been really enjoying getting through this run, but there are so many of them, and
I did
Chris
not
Claremont
intentionally try to put you on blast, by the way. That was not what that was meant to be.
No, but I'm making the kind of slow march through. But so I knew what story they were adapting, also just from the title, since it's kind of a 1-for-1. And so I knew what villain they were dealing with. I was a little, I didn't really know how they were going to adapt certain elements of it. And I think I can kind of see, but that's why I'm saying I'm curious to touch base again on this next week. But full disclosure, yeah, at first my initial thought was that we were getting like a Shadow King thing, forgetting who the villain is in the Life Death story, which is a little confusing, I think, for people that did grow up watching the original, because Shadow King is this villain that is associated with Storm, especially in certain ways. And so to see, and he looks in certain manifestations like the adversary that we get here at the end. And so I feel like that could be, I'm curious if anybody else was thrown off by that initially, but otherwise, yeah, I think it is a little bit out of left field for anyone that has not read that particular comic story.
That's me.
It will depend in some part on how next week's episode goes.
Do you think it will be a
which-
direct tie-in?
I
Or will they
I think
sidestep us
so.
back to the main crew? Okay.
But I wonder, like, is it gonna be a full? Like, I haven't looked at what the next episode title is. I feel like maybe there's a list of this out there. I'm sure there is. Greg is like listening to this infuriated right now. But I feel like my question is, do they split it up again next episode and do another kind of two-parter, or is it just Life Death Part 2 is the entire 30 minutes? Because I don't know.
I'm thinking there will be at least one more split somewhere along the way. It wouldn't make sense to split the last episode or two. So sometime in the next few episodes, I think there will be a split, because otherwise it would seem so random. But yeah, maybe Life Death Part 2 is a full episode. If it feels like it'd be weird to split that now, have a super heavy ending, and then jump into a side story for the last 15 minutes, you know?
Yeah. I mean, okay, wait, here we go. I'm on IMDb checking myself.
Here he goes.
So I think, okay. I think I was wrong. We do not get a Life Death follow-up until the week after next.
Yeah, I see. I thought they would do the Lost thing, which is give you a cliffhanger on one story on somebody individually, and then let's go check out what someone else on the island is doing. In this case, let's go back to the mansion and see what someone else is doing. And then you'll be thinking for an extra week, oh gosh, what's happening to Storm? She's getting feasted on by this owl. And they make you think about it for another week. They used to do this all the time with someone would be hiding in the vent of the hatch, and you'd see the whole episode from their perspective in the vent. And then right when it gets this crazy moment next week, it'd be a totally different flashback on somebody else on the island. And then the next week, so 2 weeks later, it'd be the same thing, but from the person in the hatch's perspective, not the vent's perspective, and get you to the exact same moment. And so it would literally be a real-time 3 or 4 week thing to get an answer on the big moment that happened in the hatch or whatever. That's one example I remember. And it feels like some TV shows take that rhythm. So I would not be surprised. That was my guess, was if they want to leave us there for a little bit.
And which is probably nice for what you were saying earlier. Like I just saw, I think next week's episode is the follow-up on the Genosha UN thing. So I think that will give us more of the full X-Men team. So that's probably, I think pacing wise for the season as a whole, that probably is the right call. It is interesting that it looks like the episode 6 will be, I think, just a full Life Death Part 2. So it's not like a split again.
I want to be clear.
I
want to be clear that I do think that that's the better call. I think if you did a immediate follow up to this and it's another 30 minutes on this story, you run the risk of getting too in the weeds on one character, and then having to shift back feels like, oh man, it's been almost a month since we were kind of thinking about this side of things. And so I think this is the way to do it, as long as you can bring it back together. That's what Lost always did so well, is by the last few, we need them all to be coming together, or like these storylines to make sense, or feel like it was worth it with the character development to have taken this sidestep in this story. I'll tell people this now because it's on my calendar. It's official. Next week, we are doing back-to-back quick chats with the gentleman who plays Bishop and with the composers of the show. Back-to-back. So I say that to say, if anyone has questions for those two people in particular, I'm kind of hoping Bishop is a featured character in the next episode, because my dream world would be to ask him very specific questions about what we've seen, and not just in general what his experience is, but like, what about this episode, so that we can seamlessly work that conversation in. I think that'd be really fun. And then same with the composers, probably at a later date, but that'll be really fun. So next week, talking about X-Men 97 episode 5, as well as checking in with those two people. And then, like I said, on Friends from Work Plus, we just released X-Men First Class, which was a fun discussion. Robbie and I have now already recorded X-Men Origins Wolverine, and that'll be the following Thursday. This week, I hope to do a bonus episode of some sort on Thursday. And then the next film for people to be watching, if they want to keep in pace with us, Robbie, would be X3.
Yes.
Once that starts coming out. So a lot of fun stuff going on.
There is also some fun stuff on the horizon with Fantastic Four. I don't know if people have been following some of the promo stuff there, but that's man, I'm really,
the aesthetic so far of the marketing has been just unbelievable.
It's been so fun, and I feel like some of the marketing for 97 was that way too. Like it just makes me. It feels like someone is having fun with it, like they're getting creative and enjoying themselves, and that always is a good sign. Now, granted, I was a big fan of some of the marketing around Secret Invasion, and that obviously did not pan out. But this feels more
the Secret Invasion marketing was fantastic.
It was. But this is like, we've got a runway. I'm really excited about the cast. I'm really excited every time I get another detail there. Speaking of, we got a Silver Surfer casting this week, which is pretty big news.
This is perfect. I was going to close the episode, but quickly, let's do a couple things here. One, yes, this is like one of the longest breaks between Marvel movies ever. And then after Deadpool, we're going to have another really long break, like 200 days before the next film. But I think, like we talked about last week, all the steps are really encouraging. Not only the shows that they are currently giving us and making and some of the changes behind the scenes off the camera, also the marketing seems to be the correct direction and the correct pace of it, what we're getting to see. Because in the last month or so, they know, excuse me, we don't have any more we don't have any content right now other than the X-Men 97 show. And so what do they do?
Right.
Well, they just slip us a Florence Pugh tour of the Thunderbolts. Let's just slip you an image of Daredevil. Did you see this? A look at Daredevil for a split second with the red eyes.
Yeah.
Let's just give you one little image of Fantastic Four. It's been enough time to follow up. And so I love the teases that they're starting to do. It feels, again, a little bit, I'm not there yet, but it's starting to feel a little bit like they've learned their lesson and they're learning how to rebuild the excitement again for next year.
Yeah.
Which, if we can get to next year, will be a fantastic year. The other thing I want to say specifically on the Fantastic Four thing, not only the casting news, but on that image, Robbie, I could be way overanalyzing this, but specifically on that Fantastic Four image of the Human Torch, does that officially confirm that they are in a different universe, or is it just an oversight in trying to be artistic? Because the background skyline looks nothing like anything we know in the MCU, as far as my knowledge goes. So either they just wanted to paint a cool cityscape and there wasn't much thought there, or they're not on the MCU timeline.
I mean, I feel like that's a really good call out. And I think that it is becoming more and more clear that they would not be on the MCU timeline.
Which is the right call, I think, what we wanted.
I think is the right call. And I was thinking about this week. There's a part of me that even looking ahead at like a rewatch for all this stuff, it could be so fun if they nail that, like just a story in a different universe that leads into the main MCU in some form. But I also don't even know that that I need it to be in that much of a hurry to do that. Like, I think if I had to guess right now, it would be like, here's a separate universe. And then maybe in the credits, like we got with the Marvels, there's some kind of like blending. I think that would maybe be the ideal for me. I kind of like the idea of at least a whole film that is not dealing with any connection to the 616, and then just kind of lets these characters develop in their own ecosystem. And then you bring them in, and I want to see the Fantastic Four interact with Namor, and I want to see them interact with the Avengers and get all of that from there. But I love this. The idea of starting a new chapter so definitively with the Marvel first family feels really fun to me. And just, getting a Silver Surfer confirmation here and getting Julia Garner, who's, an Emmy award winning actress on board, is fun and a unique take. And I am sure that there are certain corners of the internet that are really unhappy about
Furious.
a woman Silver Surfer. But, I think that's fine. We've gotten another one already. So maybe we'll revisit those movies before too long. But
yeah, my only takes on that are, one, again, I don't know the Fantastic Four. I don't even really know Silver Surfer, so I don't give a rat's ass if it's a guy or a girl, because I don't have any preconceived notion.
I mean, I'll tell you one thing: can't be a woman. Women can't surf. That's clear. Obvious. Definitely can't do it. Silver.
I'm staring at you. The second thing that I just, in general, I don't understand getting super worked up about casting rumors. Like this is not like, this is where it doesn't translate to sports to me. Like, I'm so passionate about the MCU, but I'm not passionate about who's going to play this role in 2 years. And conversely, I'll never get upset. I don't think like actually have it ruin my day when I find out that it's somebody else that I didn't expect. You haven't even seen them do it. So how do you know if it's good or bad yet? You're getting worked up on the actual casting. That's the kind of thing that I can't connect with. I get it. People are passionate about it, but I'm passionate about it. I just want to give it a chance first. And then if it's dumb, you better believe I'll be on here being like, that didn't work. But just to get so worked up. But the last thing I'll say is, I know nothing about her. What do I need to know about her? Like, in general, I don't even know who she is.
Oh, as an actor, you mean?
Correct.
She is, I think a lot of people know her from Ozark.
Oh, Jason
Bateman. Which is a show I've been meaning to watch forever. Yeah, I'm sure that you've probably heard some references to that listening to Smartless as much as you have been.
I've just heard it's amazing, but I've never seen it. Or well received,
I have
at least.
too. And it's funny because, I think it's about the area where Candace is from, more or less, in Arkansas and I guess kind of Missouri. But so we've always talked about wanting to watch it because also a lot of the folks involved, I'm a big fan of Jason Bateman. It all seems like something that I should be watching. So maybe this is what finally motivates it, in the same way that watching Oppenheimer finally got me back on the Peaky Blinders train. But if people haven't seen that, they may also know her from The Americans. She was in Dirty John and in Inventing Anna, which is the show that I think I first recognized her from, weirdly, because Candace had it on all the time. But it's about that. It's like based on a true story of the New York socialite that kind of made up an identity and conned all those people. It
feels like a perfect early MCU actor. Like this, it feels like she fits the mold of exactly what they used to do, which is very talented, but you're catching them early in their career. Like, someone saw her and went, she's amazing in this, but she's not
like Elizabeth Olsen.
Yeah, but she's not an A-lister yet. Or like a lot of them. Chris Hemsworth, like Chris Evans wasn't doing a ton of other stuff ahead of time. Robert Downey Jr. is a different story, but a lot of them, Chris Pratt wasn't doing a ton of crazy A-list stuff. It's like you find someone who you think you believe in, who you think is talented, and then get them on board, and then they blossom, hopefully, into like what 5 years from now we'll look back and be like, oh, she's an A-lister, like at everything.
But you have to be careful lumping Chris Evans in there as we're talking about Fantastic Four movies, because you're going to get some people.
That's true. He had been in one already. Yeah, he had been in one already. Yeah. Sorry, Katrina.
As a total aside, talking about Cillian Murphy and Chris Evans, went back and watched 28 Days Later last night, which is a movie I've never seen, right? But always wanted to. Yeah, and it's written by Alex Garner, who is one of my favorite screenwriters and directors. He's the writer and director of the Civil War movie that's coming out next week. He also did Ex Machina, Annihilation.
Weirdo. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Yep.
Total weirdo.
But he wrote 28 Days Later. Danny Boyle, who is known, I think, most for Slumdog Millionaire, also directed the Steve Jobs movie, which is a favorite of mine. Is the director.
That's maybe a hot
and Cillian
take.
Murphy's the lead. And then he, like, that whole team, this is where it's all connecting back. I realized the next film they made after 28 Days Later was this movie called Sunshine, that's like this random 2007 sci-fi film that I've never seen that I'm now really excited to watch because the cast is wild. It's Cillian Murphy, Chris Evans, Benedict Wong, Rose Byrne, who we saw as Moira in X-Men First Class, and then written by Alex Garner, directed by Danny Boyle. So,
by the way, Benedict Wong, star of Three Body Problem.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
That's
fun.
Yeah. It adds to it for me.
Yeah, sorry. That was an aside. But yes, to your earlier point, I do think
sounds good. Keep us posted, Robbie. Sounds good. Cool. Let us know.
The slow trickle of news.
That was the meanest thing we used to do on the road when like you don't really care if someone would do a whole thing. You'd be like, cool, sounds good. Keep us posted. I do care. I'm just kidding. Let me know.
I actually am very curious because I think the only roles I've seen Chris Evans in pre Captain America were all kind of like I'm the like hot kind of asshole guy, and so I think it's going to be interesting seeing if he's playing that character here as well, and if Steve Rogers really was the break for him, where he's like I can play someone that isn't an asshole. But
that's 3 references to
an important moment.
So I just as a heads up there today.
But yeah, you and I were talking about this some while you were here. Just my closing thought. I'm really excited because it feels like we're kind of on the other side and the pendulum swinging in maybe a positive way with the way the conversation is happening intentionally, I think, from the Marvel perspective. Like, I think that the excitement that was generated by announcements like this back in like 2016, 2017, like when they were announcing Spider-Man Homecoming or Spider-Man showing up in Civil War and Black Panther joining and Ant-Man, like obviously prior to that, where it's like, oh, that's really fun. But it wasn't this thing that like we then had to dissect to death and rumor mill to death. Like, I think that was a real sweet spot. And I think that the kind of frenzy that we were in to gobble down every piece of Marvel Studios news from like 2020 until 2022 was maybe a little much, and I think wore everybody out.
Unhealthy.
Yeah. And I think that because it puts too much pressure on everything all the time. And I think that when you're cranking stuff out at the speed they were, that adds to that. But now it's like, yeah, like we've talked about taking your time, but I also just like the really, since we have less projects, like let's really lean into those and be really intentional about the conversations around them. And so it all just is positive to me.
We always talked about how it was unhealthy for Marvel Studios and it was unhealthy for the VFX artists and sometimes even for the actors. But the one thing, good point, that we forget to talk about is that it's also probably unhealthy for the culture. Like it's unhealthy for you, the consumer, to be that, like what you're saying. So good reminder. I think it does feel like the pendulum has swung, and I'm excited about where we're going. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Please share this podcast. Tell your friends about it. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And then we'll be right back here, same time, same place, talking about X-Men 97, episode 5, right back here on Friends from Work.